All right, so I'm just going to get started a little bit briefly here. First of all, welcome to the webinar. I'm really glad you guys are able to come out here, do some lunch and learning. Hopefully we can learn some fun stuff today. Maybe, hopefully, we can learn about some of the natural areas that we can explore, especially while we're all social distancing. This is a great opportunity to get out there and explore some of the great natural resources that we do have around here. So just a couple of housekeeping notes. Everyone is muted here. And if you're not muted, please make sure that you mute yourself so we can share the audio as best as possible. If you are having any trouble hearing me through your computer, there's also an option to listen to the audio through your phone. So feel free to do that if you need to. A lot of times that'll help out with the audio if you're having any issues. If your video quality is getting fuzzy or pausing at any point, the best thing you can do is to just log out and log right back in. Hopefully we won't have any problems. It looks like the storm's going to hold off until this afternoon, so we shouldn't have any issues with that. Of course, the chat box is in there. Please, by all means, use the chat box. Ask me as many questions as you want, and at the end of the webinar, I'm going to take some time to answer those questions. So by all means, just locate that chat box and feel free to let me know what you're thinking. And also, if you guys are interested in referencing this webinar again, or if you want to pass it on to a friend or a family member, the slides will be available on our website, and then I will, hopefully by the end of today, have this uploaded onto our YouTube site as well. So you guys can rewatch the webinar if you want and reference it tomorrow or a couple of years from now, whenever you need it. So we will get started at this. And I just wanted to, there we go. So today's agenda, I'm going to talk a bit about why nature is important for us and why it's good for you. So a lot of times we tend to talk about nature and why it's good for wildlife and things like that, but there's a lot of other really great benefits to nature that I just kind of wanted to discuss and point out to you guys. So that we can kind of think a little bit more about nature and why it's important to us and why we should be thinking about protecting it. I'm also going to talk about Columbia County, just looking at it as a glance and how we use our land around us. And of course, we have a lot of really great gems that we have around here. So I'm going to highlight some of those, and I'm going to highlight some of the local parks that we have too. I'm going to briefly talk about some of the threats that we're looking at that may affect nature in the future and currently, and ways that we can prevent them, or ways we can protect nature further so we can conserve this resource that we have and try not to lose it. And of course, I'm going to leave some time at the end for a Q&A. So use that chat box and let me know what you're thinking, what your questions are. And if I can't answer your question, I will definitely do some research to try to get back to you on that. So I'm going to start off with a poll for you guys. And this is my first time doing a poll, so hopefully this works out. Hopefully you should be seeing the poll on your screen. Now, if that pops up, there's 3 questions in there. If you can go ahead and answer those questions for me. I just want to get a kind of a gauge of where you guys are at in terms of, what your experience has been in the past with nature. And it's just kind of interesting to get a look at that. Are you guys seeing the poll on your screen? Okay, looks like some of you are answering. We'll just give you guys a couple of minutes to go through them. No right and wrong answers at all. We're about halfway there. I'll give you guys a couple more seconds. You guys should be able to see the poll results at the end too, in case you guys are curious at all. looking like we're slowing down here, so I'm going to end the poll. All right, so you guys should be able to see the results there. So that first question, did you guys grow up regularly playing in a nearby forest, stream, or field? The majority of you guys said yes all the time. That is awesome. That's what I expected to hear. And a whole bunch of you also said that occasionally. You know, if you don't have nature in your backyard, at least we have some great resources around here to go out whenever you can. So that's great that you guys are able to get out there when you're younger. Looks like it's about 50-50 that some of you say it looks the same. Some of you think that it has degraded over time. We have a couple of you that said that it's actually improved, which is very cool. I love to see that site and see what was going on there and what kind of management practices were done to help it improve. But overall, in general, you're going to notice that most of our environmental resources that we have over time, unfortunately, have declined. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how I can. Oh, share results. Okay, maybe you guys can see it now. All right, so yeah, it looks like most of you guys think either look the same or it's degraded over time. Pretty much the answers I was expecting. And then the third question was that I was most interested in is, you know, what you guys think would have been the cause of that degradation? It looks like a whole bunch of you are looking at residential development. That's a pretty common one, so you're going to see housing development kind of coming in. But of course, those other issues in there are definitely going to be affecting it. But I'm glad that you guys are at least noticing that development is one of the biggest things that is affecting nature that's around here. So, and also the other, you know, there's a whole bunch of different influences that can go into, you know, environmental degradation. So I just wanted to get you guys kind of thinking about those memories you have of growing up when you were a kid and playing in a nearby stream or, you know, exploring nature and how important that probably was to you. Personally, my favorite part of growing up, I had a backyard stream that I was playing in all the time. It used to have fish and salamanders and all these really great things. And I was the same situation. We ended up on the other side of the stream getting a residential development, and they put in a bunch of wells, so it actually dropped our water table, and today that stream is no longer flowing. So it's not even a stream anymore. So it really hits home to me when I think about, you know, Columbia County and what we're doing in it and how we're developing. So I just kind of want to get you guys thinking a little bit about, you know, what's been going on around your area and how that might be affecting some of the resources that you have, you know, really great memories about when you were younger. All right. And I just put this slide here because, you know, I think Aldo Leopold said it best himself and kind of beat me to it. When he's glad that he won't be young in the future without wilderness. And I just think that just kind of summarizes it really well. I couldn't imagine growing up when I was young without being able to go in my backyard and play around and play with the insects and learn all these fun things. So, you know, just again, remembering those memories and how important it was to you as a kid, how much it really helps you develop and learn as a kid, and thinking about protecting nature and what we have here in Columbia County for future generations. And just keeping in mind that conservation is not just about for the sake of conservation or protecting wildlife. It's for protecting the resources that we cherish ourselves and allowing future generations to have those same memories too. So I just kind of wanted to get you guys thinking a little bit about that and why Columbia County has these great resources that I think are definitely worth trying to protect. So overall, I want to talk about, you know, natural areas. And there's really no definite definition to what a natural area is. It's just kind of a general physical location where natural plant growth is allowed to just grow on its own without any human intervention or design or planning. But what I'm going to focus mostly on during this webinar is natural heritage areas. And these are defined by the Pennsylvania National Heritage Program. And these are areas that support specifically more rare plants and animals, and specifically very complex ecological communities that are able to support those rare animals and plants. Now, the Pennsylvania National Heritage Program is a huge partnership between all the different agencies, including DCNR, Fish and Boat, the Game Commission, and there's a whole bunch of other people involved in that, including the Federal Fish and Wildlife Service. But they basically come all together and they really identify all these different conservation concerns, and they look for areas and they survey for areas that are really important, that are hard to come by, and things that have been relatively untouched or have had less influence than other locations by humans. So they have a really, really great website to go check out. They're going to have even more information than I'll provide here in this webinar, but the majority of the information that I did get is actually from the county inventory. So actually, every county in Pennsylvania has an inventory of all the natural heritage areas, and they go very specifically into what plants and animals you're going to find there and where you can find these places and explore them. Some of them are privately owned, so you definitely want to have to do your research before. And unfortunately, in some of these cases, I wasn't able to get any photos specifically just because they are privately owned. But if you are curious at all, by all means, go to that website and check it out. There's one for Columbia County and Montour County, so anything you want to go explore, they'll kind of guide you there and let you know what resources we do have, and they do a really great education. We have different types of ecosystems here in Columbia County, and here's just a couple of examples. Columbia County is just really blessed because we have so many different types of complex communities, and they're absolutely worth protecting for so many reasons, including, Growing Creek, which is one of our local creeks that we have. It's a very, very high quality creek, so it's something that we definitely would like to keep that way. Our PPL wetlands is slightly outside of Columbia County, but we have a whole bunch of other wetlands in Columbia County. We have Watershed Forest and all these other state forests that are really natural and really big tracts of land that we can go and hike through. Of course, I cannot do this webinar without mentioning Ricketts Glen, which, even though we just have a very tiny portion in our own county, I'm willing to claim it as our own because, Ricketts Glen is just one of the coolest places. We have so many grasslands and wildflower meadows, and then we have places like Camp Louise, which has a nice lake and wetland area. So there's so many different types of ecosystems in this. I'm going to kind of try to highlight them as much as I can. So why are natural areas important? Well, obviously, we traditionally will talk about natural areas and why they're good for plants and animals. So it provides structure and habitat for, every species, but especially at-risk species that are specifically have adapted and evolved over time to exist in a very specific type of ecosystem. And speaking of ecosystems, having a very stable ecosystem is what's best for those plants and animals. So that if you have stability, then you should be able to support those plants and animals over time. Of course, nutrient cycling and availability is probably something that's overlooked the majority of the time, but nutrient cycling is extremely important. If you throw off some sort of cycle, such as the water cycle or the carbon cycle, such as during climate change, really that's just an off balance of carbon dioxide in the ecosystem globally. So if you throw off a nutrient cycle, generally you're going to throw off the balance of nature itself. I mentioned climate change and disease resilience, so having happy, healthy plants and animals generally have less disease. Native biodiversity, so protecting our native plants and trying to reduce invasive plants is really important, and also providing those plants and animals clean water, food, and adequate shelter for them to survive in. And in addition to those natural areas for plants and animals, humans are actually really, it can be very beneficial for humans for a number of reasons. So we have sustainable natural resources, and I highlight sustainable specifically so that we can keep regenerating and using these as renewable resources as opposed to non-renewable like fossil fuels and whatnot. So an example of that would be like cutting for lumber for different products that we have, or even food and commercial or medicinal products we can get from nature itself. Of course, nature also provides an opportunity for us to do recreation and exercise, for walks and hikes, if you like to kayak in a stream or go fishing and hunting. Great opportunities that nature can provide. If you don't have nature, you can't really do some of those activities. Aesthetics is something else that is very valuable, and maybe in some cases it's not as important to others when we compare it to other things like our economy and whatnot, but aesthetics is very important. If you're a photographer services. Community well-being is something I'm going to go into a little bit more in depth, because this is something I've been studying personally on my own a little bit, and I think it's super important to understand how nature can actually improve your overall health and well-being. I'll get into that a little bit later. Again, helps us be more resilient against climate change and diseases. Right now, obviously, is a time when we're really starting to think about how we can reduce those interactions with different diseases. And there have been a few studies that have shown that the COVID disease really could have been at least prevented, and future diseases can be prevented if we protect our forests. And by doing that, it means that if we protect our forests and don't interact with them as much as we currently do, inherently we would not be interacting with the wildlife as much to be able to spread those diseases around. So that is something that you're seeing a lot of research come out of, especially lately, to keep in mind. There's also ecosystem services and economic benefits. And this is a big concept in ecology, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more right now. So ecosystem services are basically things that nature does naturally on its own. It doesn't need any help to do so, that will benefit humans in the process. So it's just kind of something that we benefit off of, and it's just kind of something we can take advantage of if we were able to protect nature. I have a huge list right there of all the things that nature can do for us. And what's really interesting, and I think most important to really understand, is the economic value of nature itself. Those are just a couple in that graph there of services that protecting forests can provide for us. And I went through and I added up, just those couple of factors, and that is about $62 billion annually in savings if we were able to protect it. So regulating climate change and not having to treat wastewater as much, and reducing the inputs needed to create food and whatnot, really add a whole bunch of value to our local economy. And that's not including everything that's over on that left-hand side in that list there. So there's a huge economic value to nature as well. It's not just about protecting plants and animals, but also about protecting our own lifestyle as well. So this is something I actually wanted to really get into, and personally, this is my favorite part of this webinar, is just thinking about how nature improves your everyday life. And I put a link there on the bottom there that's a Yale blog that I follow, and it's an environmental blog, and they did this really great article, and they talk about ecopsychology. And basically, it references all these different studies that have come out and are continuing to come out. And they have found that basically nature is really, really good for your health and your overall mental well-being and your lifestyle and all of that. So they found that it lowers your blood pressure, just being out in nature. And of course, inherently, that would decrease your stress and anxiety loads. It boosts your energy, so it gives you more energy to get up and be productive for the day. Something really important to note is that it's a really great boost for your immune system specifically. Which of course during these times like you today, that's something we might want to be thinking about, is how can we boost our immune system more naturally here. Of course, it makes us more creative and it gives us more inspiration. There have been studies that found that having access to nature, or even if you're just in a hospital and having the ability to look out of a window and seeing like a tree or nature instead of a brick building, they have found time and time again that you will heal quicker if you have, a view of nature versus if you don't. And not only that, but you have significantly less post-surgery complications. So again, nature it really does wonders for us. It really helps improve just your mental capacity to help really try to process things and heal and improve your life here. It increases your self-esteem. Really interesting, it also reduces crime, because if everyone has access to nature, generally they won't have to go out and try to, do whatever they do and do crime. So it reduces crime, and it also improves their mental health and clarity overall. So there are so many benefits just for yourself, for adding nature into your life. And I specifically added these photos to this slide. They're not photos of being out in a forest on a big hike. Like I said, it could be as simple as just right in your own backyard, having a view from a window, or just going and sitting at a local park. Can be extremely helpful for your health and well-being overall. There was a really, really interesting study I actually just read about ash trees, which, as you guys know, ash trees are dying. They have the emerald ash borer, and it's killing almost all of our ash trees. So there was a study that was kind of looking at the effect of nature on our well-being, and they looked at urban cities. And what's interesting is ash trees actually make up a quarter of all of our street trees. And so they looked at all these different cities where ash trees have died and been replaced by other species versus cities where the ash trees are still thriving. And they actually found that human mortality actually increases in areas where they lost their emerald or their ash trees, and where they still have their ash trees, they have a lower mortality rate. So simply just that access to nature, even if it's in an urban street and having community trees, but having that access to nature and the benefits that trees naturally survive, actually really significantly helps your ability to survive and be healthy. So I just think that's really interesting and worth noting there. And one other note, there was a study that went out in Nature, which is the Journal of Nature, and if you know much about Journal of Nature, it's kind of the journal of all journals for science. So if you publish something in Nature, you've made it as a scientist. So what they have found was that if you spend at least 120 minutes a week in nature, you have better health and well-being, like what I was listing earlier. And the coolest part about that is that it doesn't have to be a straight, 2-hour long hike out in the woods. You can do several short visits per week, but as long as in total it equals about 2 hours, overall your health and psychological well-being will improve. Anything less, they didn't see any benefits. They have to meet that threshold of 120 minutes. And again, that article is there if you guys want to check it out. But I think it's just really interesting to note that nature really is beneficial for yourself and your health and community and your well-being overall. So again, it's not just about conservation and wildlife. It's about how we can use nature on our own as well. So just some things to think about a little bit, and maybe try to incorporate that into your lifestyle as well. I was just anticipating that everyone was probably going to ask me for more information. So if you guys are interested in trying to add nature back into your lifestyle and get more into exploring nature and understanding nature and how it benefits you, there's a couple of really great books I've read that I definitely recommend. If you want to check those out, it can really benefit you. So if you're able to follow some of these and start getting back out into nature. So back to Columbia County, I'm just going to talk about some of the natural gems of Columbia County, places that you can go to enjoy those benefits that I had just talked about. And this picture is really great. This is up in the Central Mountain area, so it's a relatively untouched location, but this photo shows, deciduous trees and coniferous trees. There's a wetland and some upland, so it just kind of has all these different habitats in one little photo. So it's really cool to see that kind of stuff. So Columbia County, you can see in the map there, has a whole bunch of different uses for land. And we are very lucky, actually, as a county, that a lot of it is still forested. We have a ton of deciduous forests and a couple more evergreen forests as well. We're really blessed that we have these resources that are relatively untouched. However, you can tell that there's a lot of urban development and even rural development with agricultural land encroaching in on these ecosystems. So although pastures and hay and crops are relatively natural and they can benefit some wildlife and yourself, these are mostly monoculture, so you're only going to get 1 or 2 species on a whole field, whereas if you have an entire forest or some sort of ecosystem that can support thousands of different species, there's just some things to think about how we're using our land better. And we also, if you look at this map, have a ton of open space. And I had talked in my last webinar about how open space includes things like lawns. You know, it doesn't have to be like a giant parking lot or something like that. Like, we have a ton of open space in urban areas that's being unused. So reforesting these areas and trying to rewild these areas is also something that's really important that we should think about. And it's also worth noticing, looking at all the streams that we have. We have so many different streams and water resources. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more on the next slide. So you guys may have seen this if you've seen my webinars before. This graphic here, which shows all the streams in Columbia County. And some of them are very healthy streams, and we have some streams that are actually listed as impaired. We do have a ton of streams, and I always call Pennsylvania a water state. We have more water than any other state in America besides Alaska. So we have a ton of streams and water to manage, which we've all started to find out in recent years with all the flooding that's happened. We've had almost 602 miles of streams in total here in Columbia County. And out of those, we have 17 Class A trout waters, which are just absolutely beautiful waters. We also have exceptional value in high-quality waters as well. So we have some really great resources to protect, you know, for aquatic critters and even for, you know, if you like to go fishing or just sit out by a stream and just enjoy that part of nature. We have some really great resources. The impairments that we do have in our streams, for the most part, are due to erosion and sedimentation. And that has a lot to do with the lack of vegetation along our waterways. So it's I don't want to say an easy fix, but it's a fairly simple and cost-effective fix. Someone just asked what the purple streams are. That's where there's an overlap in the data. So some parts of the streams are listed as impaired, and some parts of the streams are actually not impaired at all. So it depends what part of the stream that you're on, but that's just an overlap in the data. But we also have a bunch of agricultural runoff, which is something that, you know, the conservation district here is constantly working with farmers to help improve. And there's a couple of other, you know, issues, but by far one of the largest issues of impairment or erosion. And also, I had mentioned in one of my webinars about NPS pollution, which is basically pollution that we don't exactly know the source of, but we know it's out there. So things like road salt, or if you put pesticides in your lawn or something like that, they can easily end up in the waterways. And obviously, that's not very good for fish and other aquatic insects. So there's a couple of really important conservation areas here in Columbia County. And I'm going to keep referencing that natural heritage program through Pennsylvania. And they have a bunch of information. You know, if you went to that website I showed you guys earlier, they have something called a Conservation Explorer, where you can actually go on a map and really explore it and pinpoint some things that are close to home for you. But Columbia County has 38 different natural heritage area sites that they have identified. And they actually have found over 32,000 acres of protected lands in Columbia County, which is pretty good. We have two very important birding areas. So that's for, you know, birds to reproduce in, or migratory birds, for them to be able to stop and survive, you know, on their way through their migration. And I mentioned earlier, we have some exceptional value streams, some Class A streams, and we even have a little stretch of wild trout streams. So that's really great. We have some really, really great resources here in Columbia County, and you can see from that map that they're all over the place. And there's just a bunch of examples that I'm going to get into a little bit later. I also just want to highlight a couple of plants and animals and things that are kind of listed as either endangered or threatened or at risk that the state and the federal government is kind of concerned about conservation-wise. So there's 3 plants that we have here in Columbia County that are really, really rare. So if you find them, please don't pick them, but definitely take a picture of them and possibly you can send them to me, or you can even upload them on the National Heritage website. Those 3 plants are putty root, Goose shooting stars, and northeastern bulrushes. And I believe putty root is a wetland plant as well as the bulrush, and the shooting star is actually a very unique species because it lives primarily in the little crevices of a cliff. And I'll get into that a little bit more about all the different cliffs and bluff resources that we have around here. Oh, sweet. Someone just said they had some putty root up in their flower bed. That's pretty cool. So we also have some at-risk animals. And you're going to find that there's a commonality in here, but I will get into that a little bit later. That top left photo is a green striped garter dragonfly, and then you can also see over there in the bottom right, up there is another type of dragonfly, called a lady skimmer dragonfly, and these guys are really important. They're not just really cool, fun things that like to hit your windshield when you're in a parking lot, but these guys are great wetland kind of species. And you mostly find them in wetlands, but you'll find them out and about elsewhere. But what's really important about dragonflies in particular is that they are predators. They are the predators of the insect world. They classically love to eat mosquitoes. And they, I'll say it time and time again, if you have a wetland that is breeding mosquitoes but also breeding dragonflies, you'll never get bit by a mosquito because they just eat so many. They'll eat thousands of mosquitoes in a day. So these guys are really important for, disease control and nuisance pests because they're such voracious predators. And then we also have timber rattlesnakes in select areas of our county. These guys are very threatened species. Of course, we want to run into a timber rattlesnake most of the time, but these guys are really important. Again, they are a predator. They like to go out and they like to eat those little mice that are running by and things that don't necessarily improve, our ecosystems around here. So, thinking about things like Lyme disease and whatnot, the main driver of instances of Lyme disease isn't the presence of deer, but it's the presence of things like small rodents like mice and whatnot. These guys are always eating those mice. What's really interesting is if you go out in Watershed State Forest, which I'll talk about a little bit later, they have a couple of rattlesnakes, and they're in these little rattlesnake dens that are easy to identify, so you can kind of move around them and avoid them. But these guys are out there, and you'll notice that if you're at a wiser, very rarely are you going to get a tick on you. You may get a tick, but it's going to have a really low chance of having Lyme disease. So snakes, not just rattlesnakes, but this is a threatened snake, they're actually really important. Although, I don't want to run into them because I'm just as afraid of snakes as you may be, but they're actually really important. We also have a couple of mussels. You may think, why are mussels important? They're just like a clam. But they're actually super, super important. There's a whole bunch of, someone asked where the rattlesnakes are. There's a couple of different dens out in Watershed State Forest. And when I say dens, they're just kind of these rocky outcrops. They like to kind of hang out in the crevices of the rock. So as long as you don't go climbing on rocks, you should generally be able to avoid rattlesnakes. And they'll let you know if they see you and they're there because they're rattlesnakes. So you'll definitely hear them. It's hard to miss. Back to those mussels. Mussels are super, super important for water filtration. So if you find mussels in a stream or even in a pond or any body of water, if you have mussels, they filter so much sediment and pollution, and it really helps clean up the water supply. So where you don't have mussels, generally the ecosystem might struggle a little bit more to keep that water clean. But mussels are super important, and some of them are even adapted to evolve with the American eel, which is also very rare to find, but if you do, they have a really interesting symbiotic relationship. So they're very important for multiple reasons. I had mentioned that one dragonfly, and kind of similar to dragonflies, but in the more mammal world, we have long-eared bats that are, I think they're endangered, if not threatened. And bats don't have to be scary. If you look at that picture, this guy is really cute. And what they do is they do something very similar. They eat a ton of mosquitoes. So, as we keep seeing more and more mosquitoes coming out, you may notice you're also seeing less bats. And these guys are super, super important, again, for those kind of vector control methods. And they're out there just eating thousands of mosquitoes, even not just every day, but every hour. These guys are really great at that and definitely worth protecting. And lastly, we have a long-tailed shrew, which shrews generally get overlooked a whole lot, but these guys are really important in nature because, once again, they're a really voracious predator. These guys eat a ton of insects, and they also are really important prey for things like snakes and owls, like I talked about earlier. What's really interesting is shrews are like one of the only venomous mammals, so they're also just really interesting and cool looking. But overall, if you look at this list, you'll find that the majority of these guys are predators. Predators are so important to our ecosystems and the health of our ecosystems and into ourselves as well. So protecting your predators and trying not to lose them really coincides with a healthier ecosystem. So just some things to think about there. And some really cool animals to look out for. And again, if you ever see these guys, definitely let them stay in their ecosystem. Try not to get in their way. But snapping a photo might be really cool as well. And not only are there at-risk plants and animals, but we have at-risk ecosystems. And we also often don't really think about ecosystems as being endangered. But in the ecology world, we definitely think about that. And it makes a lot of sense. If you don't have, certain ecosystems or certain processes or tree species or access to clean water, then you're not going to have those plants and animals or those ecosystem services that I had mentioned earlier. But we have here in Columbia County a whole bunch of different communities that really protect a whole bunch of wildlife and animals, and they're all over across the board. So we have wetlands communities, upland communities, we have deciduous, and we have coniferous trees in forests. We have our waterfalls and those really cool outcrops and rocky outcrop type places, and we also have some shrublands as well. So we just have a whole variety of different types of natural communities and ecosystems here in Columbia County. And them on their own, if we just can protect these guys, inherently will be helping protect the plants and animals and the services that they provide for us as well. So getting in a little bit more specifically about our natural heritage areas, I wish this picture was a little bit more clear, but this picture is actually right in the packet that you can download on that Natural Heritage website. And we have so many different resources. It's really cool to see what we have. You can check out, what township you live in and see what's nearby. We have a bunch of wetlands and floodplains, forests, hollows, outcrops, and streams. They're across the board. I'm gonna highlight a couple of them and try to give you some visuals so you can see, what to expect. So of course, Watershed Forest is one of our biggest kind of natural areas that you can go and explore. There's over 9,000 acres in southern Columbia County, and it also goes into Northumberland County as well. It connects there, but it is absolutely beautiful. There's so many different types of ecosystems that you can find right here in this area. There's a couple of reservoirs for fishing and kayaking, so you can enjoy some water bodies as well. And there's about 8 miles of trails just going one way, and that one goes between Northumberland and Columbia County. And there's also a whole bunch of side trails there as well. So you can go up into the mountains and go off that main path. What's really interesting is that there's a couple of miners' trails. These are actually maintained by the Roaring Creek Valley Conservation Association, which by all means, if you guys want to get involved, definitely check them out. They're always looking for volunteers and new members. But these are actually historical paths that the miners back in the day would take these paths to go up over the mountains to get to the mine so that they could get to work. So it's really cool, you can actually walk in their own shoes someday and see what it was like to be a miner, every morning and every night, hiking these trails to get to work. And we also have a whole bunch of mountain biking trails out there as well. If you want to go off the path, there's a ton of opportunities. It's just a really beautiful place. It's really, accessible, family friendly. And something that's just really cool, I put a photo in the bottom left there. That's a tea berry. I was actually walking out there a couple weeks ago, and there was just tea berries everywhere. So if you ever wondered what a tea berry is, that's what a tea berry is. And it's true. If you take it and you smell it, or if you chew it up a little bit, it really does taste just like wintergreen. So if you guys are tea berry ice cream fans, there's a tea berry, and that's where you can find them. Another aspect of Watershed Forest, they actually have Jakey Hollow Natural Area. This is not down in southern CA. It's much closer to Mifflinville. It's close to Millville. It's a very, very small tract of land, very small. It's only about 58 acres, and the trail is only about a half mile. However, it is such a wonderful resource because parts of this tract of land is actually an old growth forest. And what that means is that the trees, or at least some of the trees that are standing there today, are actually remnants of Pennsylvania before we settled here. So back in, the early days of settling around here, we really deforested a whole bunch of Pennsylvania. I think it was 90% of Pennsylvania was logged. They called this the Pennsylvania Desert at one point. And these trees are actually some of the survivors of that. Very rarely can you find these trees, but they actually are here in Columbia County. This is the only one that I know of besides up in Ricketts, Glen that you can find locally. There's more out west in Pennsylvania and also in northern Pennsylvania, but Jakey Hollow is just a really, really great, wonderful resource that we have, and it's such a small tract of land. It can be very easily influenced by the things going on around it. But again, if you're able to find it, definitely check that area out. It's so cool. And that far right photo is actually a photo of my husband and my puppy when we went out there, and they're sitting next to a huge, giant, old-growth pine tree. That thing is so tall and so big, it's amazing. So definitely, go out there and check it out sometime. It's a very cool experience. Ricketts Glen State Park is kind of our claim to fame. We only have a little bit of Ricketts Glen here in Columbia County, but I'll take it. It has just so many different resources, and it's a lot different than Watershed State Forest. This is right up on the Allegheny front, so you get a whole bunch of different ecosystems and transitions into them, so you can experience so many things. Of course, their biggest attraction is the 23 waterfalls that they have, and they have tons of miles of trails for you to walk on, all these different trails depending on your ability. They also have Lake Glen, which you can go out there and go fishing and whatnot, but they also have, like a beach area, so you can go and pretend you're at a beach over at Lake Glen. And I mentioned all the different ecosystems. They have streams, waterfalls, they have cliffs, shrublands, wetlands. They do have some old growth forests to be able to find them. Just a really great place to go explore. And they also have some really great environmental education programs out there. And they do some tours and waterfall tours. If you don't feel comfortable going out on your own, then you can definitely go and find some resources with someone else as well. And even in the wintertime, you can go out there and you can do cross-country skiing or snowmobiling. There's so many opportunities out there. And there's just an absolutely exceptional diversity of birds and other different types of wildlife out there as well. We have wetlands, and I just put wetlands here in general. We have so many different wetlands, and unfortunately, we don't have as many as we could. But wetlands are extremely important, and I can't stress nearly as much as how important wetlands are to, not just protecting biodiversity. There's so many unique flowers and wildlife that exist there in the wetlands, but also the wetlands are actually, ecologically, they hold so much water, it's amazing. If you want to look at, how can we prevent flooding here in Columbia County, protecting our wetlands is probably the biggest thing that you can do by far. Wetlands and floodplains, protecting them and opening them up so that streams can spread out on them, or so that the wetlands can absorb that extra water is super important when it comes to managing water. Traditionally, you think about bogs and wetlands, they have that sphagnum moss, and that it's like a sponge. It just absorbs so much water, and we can really prevent a lot of flooding that happens downstream from those wetlands. Not only that, but they have hydric soils. So they have soils that also retain a whole lot of water, but not just that, but they retain a ton of carbon. So wetlands are actually one of the best ways to sequester carbon dioxide. So it's really great for climate resiliency. So not only are you protecting yourself from flooding, but you're also protecting yourself from overall just all the effects of climate change. So wetlands are just so important. But they also have a ton of different animal species, like I mentioned, plants and animals that you don't really find anywhere else. It's in general a very acidic environment, but luckily you can go and find wild blueberries there a lot. There's a photo of wild columbine. And we even have some little sundews, which are a carnivorous plant, so they'll actually eat flies and stuff like that. There's jewelweed, which if you ever run into some poison ivy, jewelweed is to just rub that in your hands and put it on your poison ivy. That'll actually really help that situation. But we have a whole bunch of different wetlands and swamps and different types of bogs and stuff, and they're really important, for the reason I had mentioned earlier for protecting. And what's really kind of sad to think about is, especially, if I use the example of the SC wetlands there, a lot of you guys are familiar with that big bog that they have. The bog is actually a man-made structure. Before we developed there, all of SC was actually a wetland. You could put a canal through there, and that's how we did a lot of transportation. And since then, we removed all the peat moss and sold that for commercial pieces, and then we filled in the wetlands, drained the wetland, and it made that reservoir. So, even the place that, you're living at, it may be an old wetland. So it's just an example of how we tend to not really know about the historical influences of ecosystems and how man has kind of come in and changed those things. But it's really important to understand those wetlands are extremely important for a number of reasons. And they help everyone downstream from those wetlands when it comes to things like flooding and stormwater. So I mentioned those really pretty purple flowers earlier. We have a couple of bluffs, which are basically cliff areas that have a bunch of crevices on them. So there's not much soil there, but very specific types of plants are able to thrive there. Because there's not so much soil and they're not sitting next to like a stream, these guys are not as influenced by water pollution as much as everything else is, but they are very influenced by air pollution. So the emissions that we have, these guys are very, very sensitive to those types of things. One of probably the most famous one that we have in terms of, geological features that we have is that Indian Head outcrop when you're going towards Catawissa. And that area has that PA threatened dual shooting star weed, which is that purple flower there in the center. We also have American Yew, which is very rare to find anymore. It's a very sensitive plant, but it's also a really, really important evergreen shrub that we have, and you find them out there on those bluffs. And we also have golden clubs, which I think is just really, really cool looking plants. I don't know too much about them, but they're out there. So, even just these rocky crevices that we have are really important ecologically, and it's really great aesthetic and visual and cultural reasons that we have as well. So talking about human influences again, the Turkey Hill Oxbow, you guys may or may not be familiar with this. So if you guys are ever taking Interstate 80 and you're going towards Buckhorn, a lot of you guys are familiar with when you look off to the right, there's Fishing Creek that runs along Route 80. And then there's an area where kind of everything blows out and there's a whole bunch of, pebbles everywhere and trees are down and it's just a whole mess out there. But if you look off to the left, there's a really cute looking little tiny wetland out there, and that's called the Turkey Hill Oxbow. So basically what an oxbow lake is it's an old remnant of the stream channel before we put in Interstate 80. So if you look at that photo from 1939, that used to actually be called Arbutus Park. It was a gigantic wetlands complex. And again, when I talk about wetlands, it protects everyone that's downstream. So think about Fernville and the Blue Beach area. The wetland that was up there was really protecting everyone downstream that are today being affected by flooding. But in the 1950s and early 1960s, we put in the Interstate 80. For whatever reason, they decided to, instead of reroute Interstate 80 around the wetlands, they put it right directly through the wetlands. So you can see the big difference, how Fishing Creek went from flowing into a wetland to being a completely channelized stream. And then, of course, today, if you drive along Interstate 80 and look over there, you can see the stream is trying to react and fix itself and get back to its wetlands, but it just simply can't. So all that energy goes downstream, where you see that blowout. And unfortunately, not too far away, just about a mile downstream, is where it connects with the other branch of Fishing Creek, and then it goes to Bloom Beach. So if you guys are ever wondering why Bloom Beach looks like such a mess, it has a lot to do with Interstate 80 back in the 1960s. But just something really interesting to look at And even though this is, a man-made feature, it's not exactly natural. There's still some remnants of some wetlands still left over at that Turkey Hill Oxbow. And you'll find a beaver swimming in there. So it's a really beautiful place. I do believe right now it is no longer public, but it's just an example of what we do to affect the land and kind of how the land reacts. But luckily, this wetland was able to kind of restore itself, even though it's not able to connect to the stream. It's just a really interesting historical piece that we have. And of course, we have so many streams and rivers, such as the Susquehanna River, which we're all familiar with. But we have a bunch of watersheds here in Columbia County, including our Fishing Creek, Briar Creek, Roaring Creek, Catawissa Creek. We even have some Philosophy Creek. And of course, there's a bunch of other smaller tributaries that we have that come off of those streams, and some smaller, watersheds like the 10-mile Run watershed if you live out in the Mifflinville area like I do. Some really great high-quality streams and resources. Just looking at that, I mean, that's the definition of peacefulness if you ask me. And we also have these native, brook trout. And I've heard so many different times, and I like to repeat it, that if we're able to bring back the brook trout in our streams, then you've successfully restored that stream. So that kind of is my goal as a conservationist, to bring the brook trout back. But you can see we just have so many great resources to protect and to enjoy for ourselves and future generations. And of course, it provides so many opportunities besides just fishing, but for kayaking and canoeing and whatnot as well. All right, so those are the gems of Pennsylvania, but I also just want to, of Columbia County, but I also want to talk about some of the recreational areas that we have. I'll try to go a little bit quicker because I know I'm running out of time here. This right here is a photo of Bloomsburg Town Park. Not exactly the most natural area in the world, but it definitely is access to nature, and you can just sit at a pavilion or on a bench and, just enjoy all the sights and sounds that you have. Kocher Park in Orangeville is actually owned by the Columbia County Conservation District. We maintain it with a bunch of volunteers and the Fishing Creek Watershed Association. And this is located off Fishing Creek, just off Route 487, or near the Light Street area. It has a whole bunch of different walking trails that you guys can go on in the meadows. And we also have, just slightly upstream from the main part, we have a section called Johnson Flats, which has a bunch of trails that actually go right into the forested area that you skate. Some of the trails are actually wheelchair accessible, and we strive to make sure that this is, open to the public and family friendly and open to anyone with any ability as well. It's pet friendly, so you can often see people walking their dogs around there. We have some swimming and fishing holes that are just absolutely wonderful, especially on a hot day like today. And great bird watching and overall nature watching opportunities. They just have so many different types of animals and wildlife that are really interesting. And sometimes when I'm out, I like to take photos of all the flowers that I see, which you can see on the slide here. And we even have monarch butterflies, and sometimes you can even find their caterpillars over on the milkweed that we have by the pavilion. There's a rain garden there, and just some really great resources. This is open to the public. And we always encourage everyone to come check this place out. By all means, it's a really great place to come out and to walk or just relax at. It's about 60 acres in total, if you include the Johnson Flats section. There's a bunch of parking available. There are restrooms at the main park. So definitely check this place out. I highly recommend Kocher Park. We also have the North Center Township Natural Park. I don't have too many photos of this or information. I should explore this a little bit more. But this is a park that's located more on the north end of Sallinsville Road. There are some nature trails and a bunch of wetlands that you can walk through and explore. Some picnic opportunities. There's some grills and pavilion out there. It's kind of a little hidden gem in there, but just look for that sign and that photo there, and you'll be on the right track. In the wintertime especially, it's hard to miss. They have a whole bunch of winterberry holly, so you'll see a bunch of bright red shrubs with the snowy background, so it's kind of hard to miss in the wintertime. It's another place to check out. There's also Briar Creek Lake, just up the road from there. It's a 53-acre man-made lake, and the park is about 173 acres. This is actually originally in the 1970s. They designed this lake for flood control, but it's a great reservoir just to enjoy the fishing and just an overall outing. It's designated as an approved trout water, so fish and boat actually stocked us annually with trout. There are wetlands and meadows surrounding the lake, and you can also walk around the lake on their 2.5-mile trails, and there's also a park up there. There's a bunch of parking either down by the lake or up out the park, where there's pavilions and grills and water sources. There's even a playground, and there's also some really cool historical aspects, like the Watershed covered bridge was actually located up there. So this is just a great place to go for an outing. And of course, the Conservation District hosts our annual Water Education Day up at Briar Great Lake Park, where we try to bring out almost 500 or more 8th graders from Columbia County every year to learn about water. So this is just a really cool place. Definitely check this place out as well. We also have Hoffman National Area, which is in Bloomsburg, and this place is a little bit lesser known. This is owned by the county. You may have seen the sign there for it. It's right at that green bridge over right out off of Iron Street. It's about a 1-mile walking trail. It's not too much, but it does run along Fishing Creek. Great opportunities for bird watching and fishing. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that the end of this trail actually ends where that section of Fishing Creek I talked about earlier kind of blows out a little bit across from the Churches Hill Oxbow. So just a really interesting natural area, that the county set aside for us to enjoy. So another option we can get out and check out. There's also the Bloomsburg Rail Trail, which is a 3-mile loop that starts at the Orangeville Bridge and goes to Millville Road, pretty much right next to where Hoffman is. But it's open to walkers and bikers and dog walking. It's also home to the Bloom Beach that we have, and there's also some really cool rocky outcrops at the beginning section there over by the Orangeville Bridge. You can look at that photo there on the right side. There's so many different types of the plants that grow in the crevices of those outcrops. It's a really great opportunity to get up and close to that type of ecosystem. There's also the North Branch Canal Trail, which will also go into Montour County. And this is owned by MARC, which is the Montour Area Recreation Commission. And there's also some sections that are also owned by the county here in Columbia County. About 3.5-mile walking and biking trail, and it goes along the Susquehanna River. It starts at Catawissa and goes to Danville, and then you can loop back. This is actually a pretty cool historic spot in the late 1800s. This is actually used as a canal route, so there's an old canal that you're actually walking on when you walk on the trail. And of course, you can see the Susquehanna River, but you also get to see some really cool wetlands and floodplains and see them in action there as well. So just a couple of other nearby interests just to wrap this up. Not necessarily in our area, but we have a whole bunch of town parks, of course. And the covered bridges, even they're just a great historical aspect. They're not necessarily in a natural area, but in most cases, they're actually out in a generally rural area, so they're pretty nice to check out. We have a bunch of state game lands, including state game land number 13, which is actually the largest one in Pennsylvania. That's home to the Sullivan Falls, if you've ever seen those. But there's some really great exploring that you can do there. We have some other state parks. In addition to Ricketts Glen, we have Nevada State Park, World Glen State Park, and Hickory Run that are, really honestly, they're just within an hour and a half drive away from us. The Montour Preserve is just a wonderful nature place. Again, that's also owned by MARC. It's got Lake Silasaki, so you can do some boating and fishing out there. They have a whole bunch of different trails depending on your ability. Some are very family friendly. And there's also some fossil bits. They got some really cool things out there. There's a Susquehanna Riverlands and Wetlands. It's owned out by PPL, which is just by the nuclear plant right across from it next to the Susquehanna River. Really cool place to go check out. Highly recommend it. And they also, it's actually the starting point for the Susquehanna Warrior Trail, which I'm pretty sure goes all the way out to the Mammoth Coast. So really really big, long trail that runs along the Susquehanna River. There's also the Temple Cup Overlook, which actually you can go up over and actually overlook that area where the riverlands and the wetlands are. I'm not sure if Temple Cup is open or closed at this time. You have to check into that, but if you do some additional research, it's really interesting. Temple Cup gives you a really cool overview of the area and actually see a lot of the influence that the glaciers had and how they shaped our valley if you go up there. So there's some really cool geological features up there as well. In Monroe County, of course, they have marks, so they got some really great parks out there. They have the Geisinger Stewardship Forest, like Geisinger, Hopewell Park, Mexico Road Marsh, and the Hedges Field. So some really great nearby locations. If you want to get out in nature, definitely get out there and explore and try some new places out. And of course, you know, you can even use your own backyard. If you aren't into going out and walking as much, but you want to try to get those 2 hours per week in, use your own backyard by all means. That one on the left is my backyard. We had a rainbow one day, and you know, just a couple of trees is really all you need. You can also throw like a hammock out there, sit under a tree and read a good book, grow some wildflowers, and introduce some more native wildlife and native plants and color into your backyard. So these are just, you know, you don't have to go exploring nature specifically out in these, you know, crazy ecosystems. You can really just go in your own backyard and really enjoy nature itself. So just a couple of notes about exploring nature and just some things you might want to keep in mind. My biggest recommendation is to just use your senses and be aware of that. You know, obviously visually you want to see what you can see, but listen to, you know, the birds or the sound of the trees. Smell is actually really important. And actually this is one of the most important aspects of the studies that I was talking about earlier. If you guys are into aromatherapy or anything like that, you'll understand that there's so many different smells and chemicals that these trees and plants emit that when you smell them, it really helps you either calm down or have an energy boost and all these different benefits. So definitely take the opportunity to kind of, you know, smell the pine and smell the wildflowers and take it all in. Touch and feeling texture is also really important. So, you know, go and explore that. Pick something up and really take a good look at it and really study something. And with caution, take. But by all means, if you're gonna go out and try that, please learn your wild edibles first. Don't just go tasting anything, especially if it's like a mushroom or a plant. Please learn to identify it first and make sure it really is edible. There are a lot of potentially dangerous plants and mushrooms out there, so just be very careful of that. But when you are out in nature, you take your time, soak it all in. There's no rushing when you're out in nature. Just soak it in and take your good old time. You know, ask questions and seek answers. You know, if you see something that you're curious about, take a photo and come back to it another day. Another really interesting or important part of exploring nature is just trying to leave no trace. And don't take anything. Just try to leave nature the way it was before you got there. And for safety reasons, or even, you know, just for some company, bring a friend or a loved one. That can really help amplify how great the experience is. Check the weather before you go out. You're going to want to dress appropriately. Make sure you wear, you know, closed-toed shoes. And if it's really hot, you know, you're going to want to make sure you bring some water and prepare that way. And of course, sunscreen is huge. You want to wear sunscreen because sometimes, unfortunately, even though nature is really good for us, sometimes the sun can be a little bit too much for us. And of course, you bring a field guide with you so you can kind of learn as you go, or you can even download an app. I use iNaturalist all the time. There's a whole bunch of other apps out there that you can actually take a photo of, and that app will identify what you're looking at. So I do that with plants and animals all the time. Definitely, you know, use that. It's kind of a game changer when it comes to, you know, exploring nature and getting those answers faster than you normally would. I'm not going to go too in depth, but just a couple of ideas about local natural resources and protecting those resources. There's so many different things we can do. Planting trees and protecting plants, providing habitat, reducing invasive species, restoring these open lands. There's a whole bunch of things that we can do to protect our natural resources. And again, this slide will be up on our website. So I'm going to try to hurry up a little bit today. I'm running out of time here. Some things to watch for. Invasive species is probably the biggest threat we have here in Columbia County. That includes plants and animals. Spotted lanternfly is something that you're going to see a lot more of. It was just detected earlier this year in the lower parts of Columbia County. Hopefully we can keep it out, but unfortunately these guys can be pretty invasive. But there's a bunch of plants and animals. Learn how to identify them and try to react as fast as possible to these. But other things to watch out for that might threaten our ecosystems is this habitat loss and forest fragmentation. And we talked a little bit about residential and commercial development earlier. Deer browse is actually really, really bad for seedlings and saplings, especially native seedlings for trees. It's hard for the forest to regrow once these deer come in and they start eating the saplings. And unfortunately, they prefer natives over invasive species. So, managing deer is also a really other important thing to do if you own any type of woodlot. Trying to sustainably harvest natural resources instead of over-harvesting or harvesting the wrong type. You also watch out for decline of any wildlife populations. Climate change is going to come into play very soon, if not currently. Even the storm we're going to see later this afternoon could be attributed to climate change and all the extreme weather patterns we can have. And of course, pollution is something that no one wants to happen in our ecosystem. So in summary, we have lots of places to explore all over Columbia County. I highly encourage you guys to get out there. Our natural areas provide so many different ecosystem services for people, including economic values, aesthetic values, recreational opportunities, your own health and well-being, and also weather and climate resiliency. In addition, of course, we are protecting our wildlife and pollinators and plants by providing these habitats. And you don't have to go out into nature to enjoy it. You can bring it to your own backyard. So in general, just to summarize, taking care of nature for future generations is extremely important. And we can all do this if we work together and use more sustainable practices. I put the Natural Heritage Program information there. Again, if you guys want to download that county inventory, or even just email me, I can send you the PDF. Again, really great information. It goes way more in depth than I did. So I really hope that can help you guys out kind of, explore a little bit more. And of course, some of the information I go a little more in depth in our past webinars, which you can see on our website. And if you want to be notified of future webinars and events, just join our email list, and we'll get in touch with you as things go on. So with that, that's all I have for today. Again, thanks for everyone coming out. If you have any questions, please just drop them right there in that chat box. Happy to answer them, and if not, I will definitely follow up with you. So I hope you guys learned something new today. I hope you learned something new, might be a little inspired to go out this weekend. Tomorrow's supposed to be beautiful, so maybe take an opportunity if you learned about a new park or a place where you can go hike and explore. I really encourage you guys to go check it out. Send me some photos or show me, what you find, what really cool plants and animals you find, or just tell me about your experience. I'd love to hear from you guys and see, where you guys are exploring, or if you know of any other areas that I'm not aware of. I'd love to hear more about it. So if you guys have any other questions, drop them in the chat box. If not, thank you guys for coming out. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to learn about Columbia County and some of the great natural resources that we have. And of course, my contact information is there. So if you have any other questions or requests, please, by all means, just give me a call or give me an email. Said that she found some water snakes at Kocher Park. Again, snakes aren't that bad, but by all means, stay out of their way, and they'll do their thing while you do your thing. They're pretty beneficial to our ecosystem, especially water snakes. They just want to eat fish. They're not going to bother you. Oh, someone would like the resource. I will copy and paste that in here. Just a moment. All right, you should be able to get to the county inventory through that link there. Yeah, those black snakes will definitely climb up a tree pretty easily. It's kind of amazing. All right. Well, if you guys don't have any other questions, again, my contact information is there. I'd love to hear from you, or if you want me to, give you some more information or resources, I'm happy to. But about time is up. So again, thank you guys for coming out. I really appreciate it. If you guys are enjoying these webinars, hopefully we can continue doing these. If you have any additional requests about topics, I'm happy to do one. I've been contemplating on doing one specifically on just ecology in general. So if that interests you guys, or even Pennsylvania wildlife, or any topic, I am working on trying to get maybe a speaker for mushrooms. It's not my area of expertise, but I know some people have requested that. So hopefully we can get something like that set up pretty soon. So again, thanks for everyone for coming out. I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend.